Kamna, you spoke about support systems. You spoke about this need to be. We all need to learn how to feel more comfortable communicating, expressing our discomfort, even in the workplace. And I think that might be something that makes, some of us sit up and say like, "Oh, I didn't think of that," because traditionally we think of the workplace as where we go and be super professional, don't show that you're ruffled, don't react to things. But I want to ask you, when we talk about chronic stress, when we talk about things like burnout, there are larger issues at play here. And I read somewhere that burnout is rarely an individual problem. It's usually
Hmm.
reflective of something that's more systemic. So would you talk us through how you classify burnout firstly, and what should we be on the lookout for there?
So burnout happens when people are going through extreme stress, continuous stress, which is pervasive, which is chronic, and it leads to essentially the emergence of a few features, uh, which basically involves a sense of depersonalization, as though you're feeling disengaged from your own self. It leads to the development of a cynicism where you do not necessarily feel that things are working out well, and it also leads to a sense of extreme emotional exhaustion. Engaging with any sort of activity, any sort of productive work becomes extremely difficult, and it also leads to an extremely low sense of personal and professional accomplishment. So even though you may have been performing well all along, and you may currently be finding yourself at that state where you're not being able to be productive or as effective in the role that you have in front of you, and it leads to a feeling that as though I have not achieved anything, I have had no accomplishments, everything that I did was worthless or useless in the past. And these are essentially the features which are characteristic of burnout. And you're absolutely right, Amrita, that burnout is not just a revelatory of an individual's challenge with coping with stressors. It's actually also about the system, because somewhere the system is not being able to provide the right kind of supports and the right kind of space where individuals can come in and also talk about their experiences, or where they feel supported enough by the system that whatever are their challenges, they will be taken care of by the system. It's important for every individual within the system to have that space where they feel that, if they are stuck with something, there is a situation or there is an experience which is happening, that there is going to be some form of one recourse to some sort of support, but also to an opportunity to be able to talk to someone else within the system about how is it that they can manage things and how they can manage situations for their own selves. When that kind of support is not available, both in terms of how do I go about doing my role, how do I go about doing my job, plus if I am getting stuck and if I am not being able to communicate with my immediate superiors, supervisors, team leads, then what is the recourse that I have available? When that kind of a mechanism is not there, questions are not encouraged. It's not encouraged that you can share your dissent towards the kind of work or how the work is done, and you feel that you're constantly being pushed and pushed and pushed, and there are others around you who are taking it on. They may be extremely unhappy, but they're not raising their voice, but you can feel that kind of pressure constantly on you. When systems are operating like that, that's where burnout tends to escalate substantially, because we are not cued into what the experience is for the people within the system. When you look at, and this was something I was reading somewhere also, should we really be calling people resources? Because they're not resources, they are people at the end of the day. When you label them as resources, somewhere you are dehumanizing them, and you're not recognizing that these individuals who are working within a system would be having their own challenges, their own experiences, which do need to be looked at. And I think somewhere that transition needs to happen in the mindset of organizations, that humans cannot be resources. Humans are humans at the end of the day, coming in with their own challenges, their own experiences into a space, and would need to be taken care of and supported. And you would have to provide a space where people can share their experiences more explicitly, more comprehensively. And I think it's extremely important that leadership, management within systems, uh, create that environment and keep working towards creating that environment, and not just play lip service towards saying that, oh, we are pro mental health and mental health initiatives, or that we're here to support you. You have to really get into the game, and you really need to get your hands dirty and start talking about things. You need to engage actively. It cannot be just about putting up a poster here, setting up a helpline alone. It's also about ensuring that you are encouraging those conversations and you're actively engaging with the individuals or within the system to be able to show that you really mean what you're talking about, and it is of value to you if someone is struggling, because you need to show that you will take the initiative as a system to support an individual and to help them figure out what could be the best way of working through when they are struggling to do so themselves.
So when we look at that's a responsibility, the onus needs to be on, let's say, the management, the leadership, the team leaders, as you're saying. What are some of the signs you would say? You were talking about how chronic stress can actually change us as people. We know that we'll be sleeping less, we'll be irritable, we might not be able to make the right decisions, we will be inefficient. If you look at it from the productivity point of view, potentially, what are some of the signs you'd want organizations to be more on the lookout for when it comes to burnout?
I think the simplest way to look at it is that when someone joins you initially, they are coming in with a certain demeanor, a certain way of responding and communicating and sharing. If you start seeing that there is too much of a change which has happened in it, it could be a red flag. Like, that's your easiest way of being able to recognize that. Are you noticing that there is a person who has completely shifted in their way of being and behaving? And that could be indicating towards that there is something which may be going on here. Of course, this is a more generalized way of looking at it, but more specifically, if you find people are withdrawing, they are not wanting to interact and engage. If you're finding that when there are interactions that are happening, they're usually negatively tinged, or there is some sort of cynicism which is coming into the conversations, it may be a warning sign to say that people may not necessarily be happy. If you see that there are opportunities where people could share what their experiences are, but they're extremely hesitant. They tend to kind of back off every time there is an opportunity to be able to talk about something. Maybe you need to reflect on what is the system really doing to be able to create or that kind of environment where people would feel safe and secure in being able to share their experiences more frankly. I think the other aspect is that if you start seeing that there are more conflicts which are happening in the workplace, there is a lot of gossip which happens in the workspace, where you see that within teams there are people who are backbiting each other. There is a lot of feedback which is given, but it is not given directly, but it is given in an indirect manner by talking about another person behind their back. Those are all again red flags, because that is not indicative of a healthy environment within a system. I think when you're seeing that people are becoming overly competitive with each other instead of working in a collaborative way, and recognizing that growth for every individual also resides within growth within the system. And if that's not how the system is operating and people are not seeing that, and they feel that everything is about cutthroat competition and you need to cut the other to be able to move forward in your professional space, that could again be another red flag. Besides these, of course, if it's about an individual struggle, you may see people being more irritable, more angry, more snappy, not wanting to do work. You may see that there is increased absenteeism. There are a lot more people who are contemplating interviewing elsewhere. Actually, people start shifting. There is a higher rate of turnover which is happening within the system. You may see people in general having more injuries at the workplace. A lot of times you may also hear them talking about not feeling very well physically. Things like aches, pains, migraines, all of these start escalating and increasing. And they may be talking about things like sleep disturbance or the work pressure being too much. If you are continuously hearing about some of these things, these are all red flags to say that something is not fitting fine, either for the individual or within the context of the system. And you need to do a complete analysis of what may be going on first with the individual and how is the system really operating around that person.